the first prayer. It's the chorus from Lecha Dodi, and you might wonder what that has to do with gender in Judaism. And you'll find out in just a sec. So, as is my way, um, I'm going to start with the melody. We'll sing the prayer together. So everybody mute yourselves so that we don't have that cacophony. If you know the melody, I'm going to invite. I might ask Rabbi Mark to just sing another melody right after I do, because that's what we do, on Kabbalat Shabbat for Lachadodi. But most of us probably know these words. I'll just say them first. Lachadodi likrat kala panei Shabbat na Kabbalah, which I didn't translate. So, come, beloved, greet the bride, the presence of Shabbat or the face of Shabbat, we will receive. All right, that's what the words are, right? We're going to unpack the grammar in a little bit. Lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Laila, laila, but we're not going to do that part. So, these words, come my beloved, lecha dodi, the grammar there is masculine. Likrat kala, to greet. That's an infinitive. It's just the verb to greet, to welcome. Kala, bride, obviously feminine. Panei Shabbat, the face or the presence of Shabbat. Nikabala, we will receive. So that's gender neutral, right? So, Mark, Rabbi Mark, you'll be happy to know I learned this from our dear friend Norman Shore. So I'm studying. I'm going to get myself back on full screen. I'm studying with one of my most beloved teachers, and as Mark knows, and maybe other people here do, I don't know. Norman Shore is the menschiest mensch that ever lived, right? But I don't think of him as thinking about gender issues or LGBTQI issues or anything like this. But one day I'm studying with him, and he says to me, pulls out the Siddur, he says, Deb, you got to check this out. Lecha Dodi. It is the most bisexual prayer in our liturgy. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Because he knew I was bi. All right, so Lecha Dodi, in the masculine, the person who's praying, whose gender we don't know, is speaking to their male beloved. Lecha Dodi. Come, beloved. It's one interpretation. Likrat kala, to greet the bride. So, person of indeterminate gender, let's say it's a woman talking to her male friend, let's say it's a guy. Let's greet the Shabbos bride and the presence of Shabbat we're going to receive. Woohoo. So this juicy part of the liturgy, which is like male part of God, Yah, Kuchabrichu, female part of God, Shekhinah, getting together for the Holy Union, the great rite, the cosmic, And Friday night, they're doing their thing, and the person who's praying is involved in a triad with them. And whether that person is a masculine person calling to their masculine buddy to greet the bride, or a feminine person, it works either way. There's two different genders involved in this beautiful prayer experience. So I'm really sure that the sages of old did not intend for that to be the reading of Lecha Dodi. But I offer it up as the queerest Friday night liturgical drash I've ever heard. Any thoughts or questions? Mary's like, what do you do with that? I advise that you enjoy it. That's what I did with it. I enjoyed it. So on that note, I would like to start this class like we started last class when I asked about what do the characters in Torah stories say to you about gender. I'm going to ask you, based on what's in your hard drive, what do the characters in Judaism and the stories you've heard from Midrash or from Talmudic lore tell you about people who aren't cis. We've explored this a little bit already, who aren't cisgender and who aren't heterosexual. What does it have to say about people who are queer, LGBTQI+? Do you have some of us? Thank you, Devora. I'm going to call on you in a second. I was going to say, I'm so sorry Scott's not here because I know that this is an arena that he's spent a lot of time thinking about and studying and maybe even teaching. All right, Devora, yes, go.
Well, we know one thing, that men are not to be together. That's very clearly stated.
Where do we know that from?
Oh, somewhere in Torah, maybe in Leviticus.
Leviticus 18:22.
Okay.
18:22.
Oh, we didn't get there yet. No, we passed it. Oh, wait a
We're
minute.
going to get there tonight. Don't you worry.
Okay.
There tonight. Yeah.
I've been there before, so I know.
So a very good year, 1822. Were you around then, Phyllis? Come on. So, does anybody know what that text says, like off the top of your head? All right, I'm gonna lay it down. Ve'etzachar lo tishkav mishkave isha to'eva hi, which means we'll find out when we get there. But it has been taken to mean, and a man shall not lie with a man as he does with a woman. It's an abomination. Pretty much all of that is poor translation, especially translating to'ava as abomination. We'll get to that in a moment. So supposedly we learn that it's forbidden. Yes. What else do we know or not know from Torah and Midrash and Talmud? Yes, Devorah.
Well, I'm going to wait and let someone else have a turn.
All right. Devorah's going to wait. Anybody else want to chime in?
Or just Pat.
Other people aren't raising their hands. Let me close my door. So you just jump in. Go for it, Dora. Folks are nobody else is raising their hand.
Well, now my mind went blank about one of the names.
Oh, I hate when that
Hannah, the
happens.
story of Hannah and her daughter-in-law, and you do know, and that they had a very close relationship as women.
Oh, Ruth and Naomi?
Pardon?
Uh,
Ruth and Naomi.
Yeah, Ruth and Naomi. That's it. Sorry. Yeah.
Right. So thank you. So classic texts. Now, why do you think the Ruth and Naomi story lifts up queerness? Because an argument can be made that it doesn't, but it has been used, it has been, I would say, retrofitted or retrojected the notion of lesbianism onto Torah texts because clearly Ruth and Naomi loved each other so much.
wherever you go, I shall go. Wherever you die, I shall die, and I shall be buried, beside you.
Your
That
people are
sounds
my
like
people, your God is my God. Come on, right? So
yes,
the argument has been made that this is, well, there's homoerotic potential there. I think they just loved each other really a lot, like a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law can love each other. Rachel, was your hand going up? You're on mute. Rachel, can you unmute? Rachel, can you unmute? And then Shosha, I see you.
How do I unmute? Here
I
you go.
unmuted you, Rafael. You're unmuted now.
Okay. I mean, all this is really new for me. Merida said, well, you go, I go. That's after her husband died, and she was very close to her mother-in-law. There's nothing sexual in that. I don't think so.
I'm with you.
So of course we can make it sexual, but I never heard of it, never thought of it.
Well, I'm with you. It doesn't read as homoerotic to me, but it is lifted up by many in the LGBTQI space as a homoerotic text. Stosh, where are you? Your hand's not up anymore.
No, it's up. It's up.
No,
It's
no,
up.
no.
It's up. Yeah. No, but then didn't Naomi kind of pimp her out to whoever it was to have her go sleep with what's his name so that, she
Boaz.
ultimately married him. Yeah. Right.
Oh goodness. Let's maybe reframe that a little bit.
Okay.
Understand
Okay.
of the rights of marriage familially. Um, say that if a husband dies, then the brother is like the next in line to marry the widow. And if that doesn't happen, which it did not happen, then there's a next relative, male relative in line, and Boaz was that male relative. And Ruth went quite willingly. At least that's how I would read the text. So there are horrific texts of Abraham pimping out his wife
Oh, yeah.
and of Hagar being given to Abraham, but I don't think this is one of those horrific texts.
Yeah, I used the word, I was a little too casual, but I do, my reading of it, and I haven't reread it for a while, was just that she very much encouraged, that is Naomi, very much encouraged Ruth to go lie with and engage and excite Boaz, right? Prior to marriage.
Because he was the next in line to take responsibility for her legally as a wife.
Okay.
Not because, yeah. So it's hard when there are cultural norms and traditions that are accepted as normative and appropriate, that don't make sense to us for us to have a neutral kind of response to them. And I understand.
That's what I'm saying. If the women had a relationship between themselves, I wonder, would she have done that? Maybe. I don't know. That's
Oh,
my point.
got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Now I understand.
So
Are you looking for examples of homoerotic relationships?
I am
in Torah?
asking, yeah, I am
'Cause-
asking where in Torah do we see, but hold on, Rabbi Mark, because Shams, you had your hand up, and then Mark, and Rabbi Mark, and then there was someone else who also had their hand.
I had mine.
All right, Mary, Rita, and then Steve. That's the order. Shams, Rabbi Mark, Mary, Rita, Steve. Shams, go.
I don't have my hand up.
Oh, you didn't. That was a blip in my brain. Rabbi Mark.
So David Amelech and Yonatan. So David and Jonathan, he says to Jonathan, "Your love is like the love, it's like the love of a woman," and so we can read into that, and that's actually quite normative reading of it. And then the other one I'm thinking of is Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish.
Yes.
Reish Lakish is not even he's not even interested in being a Rav at first, but they form a very close relationship, and there's a very sexy scene of Reish Lakish coming out of the water and naked. And anyway, their relationship does not turn out for the best, but that's another relationship that is sometimes cited.
Thank you. And I want to say about Jonathan and David that Perkei Avot elevates their relationship as the holiest love of all. So it's not just the text itself that's been lifted up, but our sages and not just queer folks and progressive allies of queer folks, in our century who have read it that way. The sages do see their love as the holiest love of all. All right. Mary, Rita, and then Steve.
So I know this is more midrash, but I got pulled to the novel, The Red Tent, but to what was present, that the women during their menstrual time, and because they traveled together and they lived pretty much together, they menstruated at the same time. And I just think that there was, well, I believe that were relationships there because they spent so much time together.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That I can't, put my finger on something in the Torah or the writings, but knowing that that is the culture, I think it was there.
Great.
As with the men in the army.
Yeah. Shamati. Thank you. Steve.
I would like to. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, I am unmuted. First of all, I had an observation way back with Ruth Ruth and Naomi, that she really had to get married because it was from her line that the house of Jesse and ultimately David came from, and so it was really important that she have a child, right? I mean, that's what I had learned a long time ago. But I'm fascinated with the story about Reb Yonatan and Rosh Lakosh. I don't know that story at all. So, Reb Mark, if you could enlighten us, I just don't know it.
Yeah, I don't think, maybe another time go into it, but you can Google it. It's in the Talmud.
Okay.
I'll find a source for you and stick it in the chat. I just put actually in the chat from Pirkei Avot that you cited, Reb Deb.
Thank you. Yes, I didn't bring every text that's relevant to this conversation with me. So from your connection to stories and mitzvot, prohibitions, and any other midrash, anything that you've been exposed to, now that you've told us what those stories are, like, what valence do they have for you? The Leviticus text has been seen as a clobber text for centuries. Being gay is bad. You should not do it. And in the Orthodox world, it's still used as a clobber text. How do these other stories, texts, land for you? And what do they tell you about what gayness is, what transness is, what it is to be a woman, what it is to be a man? Do you feel like you've been given information from the tradition?
I think from the story of David and Jonathan, because their relationship, I think, is portrayed really beautifully, and I think I don't think it's a clobber text.
Right. I agree with you. So there's at least some diversity of characterization, right? At least, if not a preponderance, if you look at, the Reish Lakish story, and the Jonathan and David story, and if you want to use the Ruth and Naomi story, you see that maybe there's more narrative that's positive than not. So I want to return to some text that we learned a few weeks ago. Was it maybe last week, maybe the week before? I think it was 2 weeks ago. Vayivra Elohim et ha'adam b'tzalmo b'tzelem Elohim bara oto zachar u'nekava bara otam. Those who were here, you will remember, Yah created the earth being, that first Adam, in the divine image, in the image of the divine. Yah created it, or this one being, male and female. Yah created them. This one being was them. It was them. Dvorah, your hand is up. Did you intend to raise your hand?
I did, but I think I was too late because you've changed the subject. So.
All right, maybe we'll get back to it.
Okay.
So what I want to just check in again on this text, not about what it says about non-binariness, the non-binariness of Yah, or of our essential nature, perhaps, but what it might say about queerness, which I just have to tell you, the reason I'm focusing on queerness today is because I think queerness is a subset of gender, because folks freak out about somebody who appears to be a man being with a man and someone who appears to be a woman being with a woman, because they see, immutable gender roles. Man has to be with a woman has to be with a man. And so And God forbid a man be submissive to another man, because if one has to be submissive, you see what I'm saying, right? So I think it's all interrelated. So putting this now into the relationship sphere as opposed to the identity sphere, what does this text say to you? If the first being was both male and female, if that's what God is, if we are to aspire to be godlike, what implication does that have for our relationships? Anybody?
Well, I know I said this probably the first week, and it draws me first to what I learned about like that as that we have both male and female aspects of our psyche. But this then takes it another, more than another layer down, that we, like, I might not have male and female genitals, both of them. Um, I'm not, it's not going to come out.
Hermaphrodite.
Yeah.
Intersex is the word we use today.
Okay. What do we use today?
Intersexed?
Okay, thank you. But I do believe that I remember learning and really believing that, that I wasn't like 100% female, but that I was a mixture, and it wasn't just psyche, that there was something that would go down into like my DNA and my cells that would influence who I was. And I used to think, I feel like percentage wise, I was more female, but what I understood as male traits, that I also had a percentage of those.
So thank you. I'm not going to ask you to continue that question, to continue to answer my question. But my question is, what are the implications of that for our relationships?
Okay.
Not for our identity, for who we are in intimate and sexual relationship with. So let me lay some stuff down. Here's what I think the implications are. We are being invited in this text to cultivate our holy wholeness, gender-wise. We can be afraid of that. We can be confused by it. We can destroy or cut out or compartmentalize parts of it. But if we choose to take the invitation and cultivate it, if we actualize ourselves fully, and we seek to partner with someone else who's actualizing their fullness, then does it matter one whit whether that person has a genital outie or innie?
Mm-hmm.
That's what this text says to me. It does not matter one whit. That focusing on that tiny part of our anatomy as a categorical threshold for a yes or no, can we be in relationship with that person? It just makes no sense to me. And if we happen to be in relationship with someone, if we have an innie and they have an outie, spiritually, if our paths are to support each other in being fully evolved into our wholeness, then our relationship goes so far beyond whatever one can do with those two parts of our body. Shosh.
Yeah, I'm staying off camera because we're just actually we just got available to eat dinner, so I don't want to be on camera too much. But question, I buy all that and I get it and I believe it. However, what does that say for procreation of the species if people didn't pair up the old traditional way enough?
Yeah. So what it said, well, I guess
Not without modern science, of course.
No.
Yeah.
It's a great question. And I have to say, given where we are today and the dramatic crisis we're in overpopulation on this planet, that doesn't concern me. Because I'm confident that enough people with innies will get together with enough people with outies that will have enough babies. And I'm also confident that people would figure out ways, oh, I want you to be my primary love, and we both have vaginas. Let's find a guy who give us some, donations, and we'll make babies. So we don't necessarily have to even include science. Yeah, I guess I'm not worried about the survival of the species. I feel like the urge to procreate will be there no matter what our partnering or coupling or decisions are. I could be wrong. That's just my sense.
I
Mary Rita, yes.
I find myself kind of breathing really much more just relaxing, that this reading it this way or seeing this as being given to us this way like just opens portals that weren't there, for relationships. Yes. And not thinking like, oh my goodness, without labeling, without a person having to label themselves, oh, I thought I was this, but now I might be that, or I have to be this. But to know that this could just normally be possible.
Halavai, halavai. I think, yeah, I'm with you. Obviously, I think maybe it's obvious that I'm with you. I agree.
I never thought of it before. And when you read that last week, I probably wasn't there. But as I sit with it, I go, oh, okay.
Beautiful. I'm going to stop the screens here so I could be more with you all. Devorah, did I see your hand go up?
Yeah, the idea of having characteristics of both. I mean, I remember in my 20s, I got a toolbox because I lived by myself and I bought tools so I could do stuff in my apartment. And people said, oh my God, you're so masculine. You're so, right? And it's like, no, it's just,
Really?
or if it is, it's fine. I like doing this. It doesn't change who I am. It doesn't redefine me.
Shamati, Bacha. And then I want to go on to some more Genesis, some more Breshit text. Yes. Where are you, Bacha? Go ahead.
So what I'm thinking about are role models and how they've changed over the years. I had two parents that had reverse role models, and I grew up without any role models for myself. And I just ended up like I am without having anything that was expected of me. And so I'm thinking about how I'm an old person, so I think about how, Ozzy and Harriet, I mean, those were our role models back then, and now it's just changed so much. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think because things are changing so much and new possibilities are emerging in the here and now, that also opens our eyes to see our tradition, the ancient aspects of our tradition with fresh eyes. Because, you can't see what you can't imagine, right? You can't see what you can't imagine. And you certainly can't love what you don't feel safe with, right? So it is all connected. I appreciate you bringing that in, Bacha. I want to say a few words about the Torah story that I mentioned a couple weeks ago, comes after the first Adam. Some say there's two origin stories of humanity. One is the first Adam was created, right? And this was both male and female. And then later, chapter 2, verse 18, we have the Ezer Kenegdo, his helpmeet story, where there is the being taken from Adam's usually translated rib, Sella, I think side is a better translation because then it makes it totally compatible with this first story, right? The first being male and female, they're separated from one another from the side. All right. Now, in this Ezer Keneged story, those who are Orthodox say, oh, that story proves only heterosexuality is okay. The male and female were separated at the birth of humanity, and now, if you want to be whole, you have to get back with your opposite other. That's how they define Ezer Keneged. It's actually, It's a fair reading of the text. I have to give it to them. Of course, I disagree. I think the text is more nuanced than that. So these two words, ezer keneged, usually translated as help meet, for those who have Hebrew in your hard drive, how else might you translate it? And kenegdo is his, so I just, made it standalone. Ezer keneged. Shosh.
Yeah. So a help opposite him, like opposite him, neged, opposite.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes, a helper who is opposite or different. Now, oh, what's opposite? Well, you could say male and female are opposite, but let me tell you, I think Myers-Briggs, ISTPs, and ENFJs are opposites. And I think people with anxious attachment are opposite from avoidant attachment people. And I think neat people are opposite from sloppy people. And Litvaks are the opposite of Chassids. You get these intellectual types and the mystical types. And I think people who are grounded are opposite from people who are airy-fairy, and people who are mean are opposite from people who are kind, and people who are into having kids are opposite from people who don't want kids. Right? You can understand this opposite, helpful opposite, in 1,000 ways. Why does it have to do about gender? There's all kinds of in our midrashic tradition, there's a lot of focus on people finding their beshert and their intended, right? The person who's perfectly complementary. Complementary is actually not a bad framing for Ezer Keneged also, right? It's somebody who's different in a way that's complementary, that's going to be useful. Yeah. So I don't think this text needs to be read as men and women have to be together. Anything else can't work. So I'll just leave that there, ask if there's any thoughts, comments, or questions on that before we fast forward to Leviticus 18:22. All right. Going once, going twice. I'm not seeing any hands up. Oh, there you go, Devorah.
Well, since you're going to go to Leviticus, the comment that I wanted to make earlier maybe is appropriate here, which is that when we were looking at the other stories or the other, maybe not the Genesis thing forget that part, but all the other things we were talking about, I always understood that because this Leviticus story was in Torah, it was more valid than any of the other ones that were told because they weren't actually in Torah.
Great. Let me disabuse you of what you think Leviticus 18:22 is about. I put it in the chat because I want to be able to see you all better than I can when I'm sharing the screen. Here's how I unpack it. You've got the language there. Ve'et zachar lo tishkav mishkaveh. Take one. Ve'et zachar, and with a man, lo tishkav, you shall not lie, mishkaveh isha, in sexual intercourse, as, that word isn't there, with a woman. To'evahi, it is an abomination. Let's start with to'evah. To'evah, if you do a concordance search, and my friend Rabbi J. Michelson did, found 103 uses of the word to'evah in all of Tanakh, so Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. He found something interesting. Except for its usage in the book of Proverbs, it almost always, so like 98% of the time, explicitly refers to engagement with a non-Israelite cultic practice, avodah zarah, idolatry. And in only a few locations, fewer than 10, including the passage, a passage on unequal weights and measures, it's a word that's just like 10 bizarre usages. So in over 90 occasions, it's explicitly about foreign practices. It says, and the idea is, don't use idols, deploy sorcerers, engage in foreign acts or customs, don't sacrifice children, and things like that. That's what is to'avah. To'avah was also used about our practice of kashrut, when the Egyptians wouldn't eat our food because our food was to'avah to them. It wasn't abomination to them. It's a practice forbidden to them. Shosh is saying, like a goyish thing. You could say that. What can be concluded? If you read this, don't do this. It's a cultural appropriation of somebody else's practice. Most specifically, the cultic pagan rite of two men stooping in a field to create fertility for the next season of agriculture. All right? That's what's prohibited. So you could read the rest of the text as it is. Don't lie with a man as you lie with a woman. It's prohibited. Those other people do that. Just like we don't sacrifice our babies, just like we don't eat, we don't boil a kid in the milk of its mother, just like la, 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 la. We don't do that. So the way I like to bring it into today is I used to say, so if a couple comes into my community and they're members of my congregation and they're two men and they want to get married and they come to me and they say, Rabbi Deb, is it prohibited to us to get married, two men? I say to them, well, first of all, I'll get to what I think later. But what Torah has to say is, are you guys having sex in the field in like March to make sure that the crops go really well? And of course, invariably, they'll say, what are you talking about? No, no, no. I'm like, great. And by the way, if you were doing that, I don't have any judgment. You go, you have sex wherever you want. But if you were doing that, then Torah would say that's prohibited. But if you're just if you have a life. You buy a house together, you furnish it, you decide what color the couch is going to be, you have meals together, you eat your meals together, maybe you want to have kids, you decide, how you're going to plan your family, you decide where you're going to go on vacations, and yes, you get naked together and have intimacy. That's all fine. Torah has nothing to say about that. So yeah, Torah trumps Midrash, and that's what Torah has to say. Now, let's take two. The Hebrew phrase that Torah uses to refer to sexual relationships, asexual relationship with a man, we see the phrase in Bamidbar, Mishkav Zachar, for that purpose. The verses in Leviticus do not use the phrase Mishkav Zachar, or sex with a man, right? Remember it says, Ve'et Zachar lo tishkav mishkavei isha to'evav hi. All right, you don't have to be Hebrew fluent to hear. It's just, it doesn't use that phrase. What does it mean? Ve'et Zachar, along with the man, lo tishkav, you shall not lie, mishkavei isha, in sexual intercourse with a woman, to'evahi. Ooh. It's a ritual practice prohibited to another tradition if you lie with a man along with the woman. Oh, threesomes might be prohibited by Torah. Not by me. I don't judge. Like, whatever you want to do. So, grammatically, the text does not really support an antagonism towards same-sex connection. All right, floor is open. Comments, questions, thoughts, concerns. All right, there's something. All right. All right, shall we move on to the next text? Yes? You ready? All right. This one is in Devarim, and I am going to show it to you for at least a second. So 22:5. Can you all see that? Lo yeh chli gever al isha, velo yilbash gever simlat isha, ki to'avat Adonai Elohecha, ki ose ela. A woman, typically translated, a woman must not put on man's apparel, nor shall a man wear women's clothing, for whoever does these things is abhorrent to your God. All right? Now I'm going to put it in the chat so that I can see you and talk to you. All right. Folks familiar with this text? It's the anti-cross-dressing text. Any thoughts, any comments? Has it informed you? Has it harmed you? Has it confused you? All right. All right. I'm going to unpack it for you. Did I hear anything? Okay.
Yeah.
Shosh.
Me again.
Great.
So again, is it not the same thing you just said before? Is it must be a pagan custom, and that's what you can't, it's not that it's abhorrent, but how does that answer if it's a pagan custom to cross dress? It's not abhorrent, but it's still saying you shouldn't do it.
Right. Well, yeah. So today, do we say don't engage in the customs of other traditions? Yeah. So for somebody who's Orthodox, yeah, you might still have that prohibition, but I am going to unpack this text to take away that prohibition. Rabbi Mark.
Yeah, what has always stood out for me in this text is that there's no comparable prohibition of a woman lying with a woman.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering out loud here whether, in thinking about Rabbi Jay's, looking to cultic rituals, whether there was any understanding that when you penetrate someone, which doesn't happen between two women, there is maybe an unstated violence in there, and a power differential, a possibility of it. So I'm just throwing that out there. I'm just jamming here out loud about why the Torah and why we're so on top of men should not have sexual relationships. Well, we don't pay attention, or Torah doesn't pay attention to the equivalent for women, because there is not equivalent when it comes. Women don't have penises. I mean, it's that simple. But I've always wondered about that.
Well, there's some legitimacy in that rabbis were kind of obsessed with penises. I mean, we have circumcision, right? And one of the rationale for circumcision is so that it would be a mnemonic device. When a man looked down at his circumcised penis, he would remember not to use it for harm. And so it's not out of the question that this was the focus, that you can't actually act upon another man in a way that would put them in a submissive role. That's not out of the question. You may or may not know there is Talmudic texts. It's very bizarre. It's framed really weirdly. It's like women should not act like the Egyptians. It is not even explicit. They should not act like the Egyptians. But it is understood to mean lesbianism. So, but yeah, there isn't any Torah text on that. So, yeah, more musing over coffee sometime, perhaps. Shosh.
So a little more basically put, and I can't speak because I am a woman, but from what I understand, men like to watch women doing their things. So write lots of porno on that. And since men wrote the Torah, primarily, they probably didn't want to have it prohibited because they wanted it to continue.
Gosh, that was astute. Yes. All right. I want to get back to, because I've already moved on, friends. I have moved on to cross-dressing. So I want to unpack that text. First, lo yiyech gever al isha. It doesn't actually say that a woman shouldn't put on the clothing of a man. Lo yiyech gever al isha. Don't put on, there will not be put on the garments. And gever is an interesting and unusual word for man. It is ish is the basic word for man, right? Gever is a word that's strong man. It could mean warrior, actually. I think the best translation of that is there will not be vessels or equipment. Chli is also not beged. It's not, basic word for garments. There will not be vessels or equipment of a strong man or warrior put upon a woman. Don't conscript women into the army. It happens to actually be placed in the text very close to the laws of war. Interesting. So Gever and Gibor, by the way, like big, yeah, I can see the Hebrew folks are nodding. Okay. So interesting. It also does not say Lo tilbash isha gever, women do not wear the implements of a warrior. It literally says they will not be put on her, right? So the woman is in the position of being acted upon. I think it's really problematic to see this as an anti-cross-dressing text. So it might very well be about not forcing women to serve in military capacity, or at least not be dressed in that way. Don't put them in risk. Don't, make them targets in a military setting. The next portion, V'lo yilbash gever simlat isha, and neither shall a man wear simlat isha. We talked about this the other day on around Joseph and his simlat, right? That was a feminine word for a word for a feminine garment, a wrapper or a mantle. There are those who say that particular word, again, it's not beged, it's not clothing, covers the idea of a cover that resembles the shape of the object beneath it. I'm not the only person who has noticed this, because the word simla may come from the word semel, which means image, idol, or figure. It's a relatively rare word. It only appeared 28 times in the Torah, while the ubiquitous word beged, clothing, appears well over 400 times. So, we think that when words are unusual, that they are used for a specific reason. So what I get from that is also in the context of war. Men, if you're in war, don't dress in a way where people can see what's underneath you, like namely the knives you've got strapped around your thighs and, perhaps on your calves. And also, we don't want to sexualize a man. We shouldn't see it in too much of a man's figure. So I think there's some sex role things going on, but I think it's very specific to this kind of garment. So women should wear the sexy clothes and not the warrior clothes, and men should not wear the sexy clothes and should wear the warrior clothes. All right. Yes, Rabbi Mark and then Mary Rita. It looks like you want to share something too. So Rabbi Mark and then Mary Rita.
All right. So both the other text about a man lying with a man and this text leads to a ki toivat, right? That uses that effect. And we've already established that a toiva, an abomination, it can be understood as being connected to cultic rites.
Correct.
And so what it's might be saying is that here are examples of things that if they could lead to unholy things. Right. And now I'm not making a case for cross-dressing here, but I am making a case for love. And if things are done out of love, it's not going to lead to an abomination. So it's all in the intention that's brought to doing these things. I'm just interested in the the word toiva again appearing here in this pasuk.
So thank you. That's a beautiful riff on it. And another riff is, what were men wearing in other cultures that were tight-fitting things that we don't want to be like them, right? And what were women wearing? Maybe they were Amazon warriors without one breast, wearing these leather bustiers like Xena warrior princess, which I'm really into. But maybe, the sages didn't, whoever authored the Torah didn't want to see that in the Israelites. Mary Rita. And you're on mute.
Well, also I'm getting a sense that it doesn't surprise me, but it feels like a lot of these kind of lean more into what is not appropriate for the man. And like for this one, it's like it is don't like don't put warrior clothes on the women and make her like Joan of Arc or something, like don't conscript her into the army. But the man just feels um more encompassing for the man, like what he can't do.
Mm, mm. I do think that I think the Torah text itself is more occupied with men than with women.
Yeah.
I think the sages' reading of it was more occupied with men than with women. Although,
Could could we use this? Like I'm thinking about when I was trained in canon law and we would go to like Vatican II or the scripture in order to like argue a point. And if I wanted to argue that like women that it is okay for women to be in the armed services, then I might want to like not see this as something being done to her, but as this is something that um belongs to her.
it's a choice.
It's a choice.
Which is why that framing that I harped on earlier about it's not about the woman saying, I'm going to do this. It's about it being put on her.
Yes.
That's what's prohibited.
Yes.
I am with you. I think it's an anti-conscription text.
I mean, this would be great to use these days now, especially
Right?
what they're trying to do.
Exactly. Gotcha. Yes. And you're muted.
Of course I am. So this is all taking me back to the 60s, coming out in Los Angeles, and it was illegal, against the law, for anyone to have less than 3 articles of their own clothing. And they would physically take people out of bars, coffee houses, to do that. And I knew people that got arrested. I just wanted to mention that because it's not just our Torah, it's legal things too, modern things.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. Are we ready to move on, fast forward a little bit into the Talmud? Yeah? All right. So I feel like I kept promising this 100 times, and all right, I want to make sure I get the right thing. There it is. This is the Talmud text that shares the 6 different kinds of genders. And sometimes this is split into 8 because there'll be different genders of Ilonit and Saris. But basically, the 6 basic categories: Zachar, as I mentioned before, in that Breshit text of the first being Zachar Unekava. So Zachar is male, Nekeva is female. Androgynos, androgynous. You'll see here, I mean, there's thousands of references to Zachar Unekeva. Androgynos, 149 references in Mishnah and Talmud, 350 in classical Midrash and Jewish law codes. Tumtum, we talked about both Abraham and Sarah being tumtum, a person whose sexual characteristics are indeterminate or obscured. 181 references in Mishnah and Talmud, 335 in classical Midrash and Jewish law codes. Ilonit, a person who's identified as female at birth but develops male characteristics at puberty and is infertile. 80 references in Mishnah and Talmud, 40 in classical Midrash and Jewish law codes. And a Saris, male at birth, develops female characteristics at puberty and or is lacking a penis. And this Asaris is a eunuch. Asaris can be can occur naturally, or can become one through human intervention, which we might today call transitioning. 156 references in Mishnah and Talmud, 279 in classical, 379 in classical Midrash and Jewish law codes. So just reading this text, if it's new to you, if it's old hat to you, what are some thoughts that arise for you about it? And we're going to look at some examples of what Talmud has to say, how it uses this information. We'll just dive into the examples. Mary Rita, you're on mute.
Right. For me, it's quite refreshing that refreshing is the wrong word, but that there are these six categories that were actually in the Talmud or maybe in the law books that were identified as possibilities.
Yeah, right. Refreshing is, yeah, the least of it, at least refreshing. Judy, you did. And you're on mute as well.
I didn't understand the context or what it means to have a mention. Maybe that's what you're going to get into, but like, and how much, I mean, it sounds like big numbers, but what is that relative to other stuff that's in those sources? So I just wasn't sure if that meant they were talking about it a lot or they weren't talking about it, or it wasn't a lot, or anyway.
Yeah, so I can't tell you how many times they mention dogs or cats, or I mean, it depends on which, a lot fewer times than the words male or female are used. But just in terms of quantity, it's it wasn't mentioned once or twice, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to give you examples of some mentions right now. So maybe this will be helpful. Oh my gosh, there's too many. I have too many things up on my windows, so I need to make sure I give you the right thing. Here we go. So, some examples. Bikurim, chapter 4. The androgynous is in some ways like men, and in some ways like women, and in some ways like both men and women, and in some ways neither like men or women. So we have just a basic, this is what an androgynous person is. And there's several different flavors, because there's all these different characteristics they could have. Who would like to read the second Mishnah right underneath that? Somebody who hasn't spoken yet, maybe. Is that anybody? Steve, I don't think I've heard from you. We've heard much from you. You had a question. Would you mind reading Mishnah 2?
How is he like men? He becomes impure when he has a seminal discharge like men, and he dresses like men. He can take a wife, but he cannot be taken as a wife like men. He must not be alone in the company of women like men, and he must perform all the commands of the Torah like men.
So, yeah, so what do people think? What are the rabbis trying to figure out? These are going in order, by the way. So they're still talking about the androgynous.
They're trying to figure out what his role is, what he how he acts in the community.
How he fits in our community, yeah.
Yeah, can he be counted in a minyan?
Right, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Third, who wants to read Mishnah number 3?
I will.
I can read it. Oh, sorry, Judy, go ahead.
Mishnah 3. And how is he like women? He becomes impure when he has a menstrual flow like women, and he must not be alone in the company of men like women, and he does not share the inheritance of the sons like women. Like women, he is disqualified from acting as a witness.
So let's not get all riled up about the clusterfuckery of those prohibitions against women, right? And by the way, next week, we're going to focus on the daughters of Zelophehad, which made absolutely clear that women can inherit from Torah. So, all right, we'll stop now that I have discharged all the annoyance about that part. So you see, again, they're just still trying to figure out, how does this person who's complicatedly designed fit in? Who wants to read Mishnah 4? Mary Rita.
How is he like both men and women? Guilt is incurred for killing him or for cursing him, as in the case of men and women. One who unwittingly slays him must go into exile, and one who intentionally slays him receives the death penalty. He inherits in all cases of inheritance, like both men and women. Whoa.
So this seems to be somewhat disagreeing with the last one.
Yeah, it's a
Does
complete
not share
opposite.
inheritance with sons like women, right? But that's okay, because we know that the conversation in the Talmud definitely reflected different points of view. Now, oddly, we're not getting the names of the Rabbanim who are saying this, that, and the other thing. So finally, in Mishnah 5, how is he like neither men nor women? Is there someone else who'd like to read?
I can read.
Great, Dvorah, go for it.
Mishnah 5. And how is like neither men nor women?
Sorry, that's probably like, how is he like neither men?
Yeah, how is he like neither men nor women? He cannot be assigned a value for the biblical temple tax because one amount is specified for men and another amount for women, unlike men or women. And he cannot be sold as a Hebrew slave, unlike men or women. If someone says, I will become a Nazirite, that is, take the vows of asceticism, if he is neither a man or a woman, then he becomes a Nazirite. Rabbi Yossi says the androgynous is a creation of its own kind, and the sages could not decide if he was a man or a woman. But this is not the case for the tumtum. Sometimes the tumtum is a man, and sometimes the tumtum is a woman.
So what I will just say, what I read here is like in the intersex world, there's probably 100 ways to be intersex. Some of them are chromosomal, some of them are physiological, some of them are internal, some of them are external, some of them are all three, right? And I'm really sure the sages at this age, at this era, did not have access to this scientific medical information, right? This was all based on observation of humans who came into their world, right? Who they encountered, who had questions about themselves. Many rabbis performed medical roles with folks in their community. So what I'm reading here is like, all right, there is this complexity, and some people, the androgynous, are neither men nor women, and some people are sometimes a man and sometimes a woman, different kind of intersex. And we don't understand it really, but we're doing our best to keep everybody inside, to keep everybody in the community. And I just read that as just so beautiful. So comments, questions, where would you go with this? In a conversation, if you were going to report on this in a conversation to a friend about something that you just came on your screen, what would you say? Anybody? Steve, and then
I would say that nobody is excluded. That they're going through all of these things. What role does this person have? But it's not we are excluding this person. It's how does this person fit in? Not how do we exile them and leave them out?
Yeah, Shosh.
Nice. I'm impressed, refreshed, as Mary Rita said, maybe impressed with how Torah is open to all these different aspects, perspectives on sexuality, on physicality. And it flies so much in the face of, we won't say his name, who says it's only male and female, and that's the end of the story. If he actually ever read his, gold-plated Bible, he would know it.
Indeed, but we already know that that's never happened.
Right.
Mary Rita.
Right.
So what we're looking at, is that we're looking at ways to interpret some of the verses that are in the Torah, and and that this is and that gender is represented in the Torah. And then we just went through some things in the Mishnah, and I will go back to refreshing because I think this is amazing. As one who has studied Roman Catholic canon law, there is nothing like this in Roman Catholic canon law, and we know, I know, well, I don't know, but I don't think that this was ever I know this was never taught to any of the courses that any of the moral theology courses that I had. Whether they'll do it now, I don't know, but I know that it's not in the law book. So this is like really, there's like a fluidity or a flexibility that was like meeting people where they are rather than like putting them in like a structure and making them fit a structure.
So my guess is everybody in this room, feels good about these texts. Maybe you're struggling a little because it's new, but it doesn't feel like, oh my God, this is gross, right? So a question I have, and I see your hand up, Devorah, is after Devorah speaks, the question I'd like you to reflect on by yourself, we'll just stay together for this class, is there someone in your life that you would like to share this with who you think might struggle a little bit with it? And it could be an opening for you to support them in expanding their thinking. And if there is, how would you do that? What of the texts we've used so far, what would you use and how would you have that conversation? I'll repeat that instruction. Devorah, you're going to speak, and then I'll ask you, and I'm going to ask you to reflect for a good 5 minutes, not just really quick. Devorah.
I was trying to figure out, so if it's in Torah and Talmud, what has changed our world? I mean, obviously that was 2,000 years ago. So, but I guess we're subject to other religions and other cultures. And it was never talked about, ever. But I grew up in a family that had the Merck manual and had some other medical books, and I used to take them off the shelf and read them and see pictures of exactly what's being described here. But it was like, okay, I closed the book and put them away because I wasn't supposed to read them. But I was aware that these were medical anomalies or something, but I never, and no one ever talked about it. But obviously, it's been in existence forever.
Yeah.
And so the Torah has found a really good way to talk about it.
Yeah. So I thought when you were starting, you were going to say, like, since this has been written for thousands of years, why have we not been talking about it for thousands of years?
Oh, that's what I wonder. Yeah, like why was it hidden in a book on a shelf that I wasn't supposed to read?
Yeah. So I've mentioned this before when we started, and it bears repeating. First of all, we're instructed to turn it over and turn it over and turn it over again, right? I mean, at a minimum, the Jew in the pew is reading the same text every year, once a year, right? At a minimum, the Torah text. And every year, without fail, the person who's dedicated to that experience will learn something new, right? Every year. So my sense is that it takes a certain number of times to turn things over when they clash with the cultural norms that surround us. For us to even be able to see a glimmer of a possibility that there's something to learn that's so outside the realm of what's possible for us, right? And so Batya, brought up laws around clothing and also around role models that we have in our world now. We have come to a moment in today, or in the last, let's say, 100 years, where there's enough information around us that has opened the potential for us to be able to see this. And so we can apply those openings, awakenings to our ancient texts. That's one thing. Another thing is, stuff that the Talmud wasn't exactly like, I don't know. It wasn't in conversation of the average Jew. People were in the Beit Midrash studying what they were studying, which I don't know how many of you realize this, but it's a totally homoerotic environment. I mean, studying Talmud with a chaver day after day after day, going into the micro details, it's so intense and beautiful and mind-blowing. It's amazing. It's so passionate. It's so homoerotic. Like, people, the dudes are falling in love with each other all the time, which is probably why ultra orthodoxy is so homophobic, because it's terrifying and there's no, container for it. So I say that to say, who knows what in that world was actually being discussed and what permission was actually being given. I don't know. I think there's a lot of stories that have not been revealed yet. That's my thought. If anyone else has other thoughts, yeah, Rabbi Mark.
You saw me. So I just I found a commentary from Chizkuni. This is like 13th century Rashi time, and he kind of calls. It's a text that calls things that we might want to learn from Midrash. And I found this fascinating. I hope this is not too far afield, but on the pasuk, a woman shouldn't put on men's clothing, and vice versa, right? So he lifts up that Yael, remember? So Yael kills Sisera, right? Right, now, right, and just did it, right? How does she do it? With a pentag, a tent peg, not a pentag, with a tent peg. So the teaching is, now check this out. The teaching is that Sisera knew this Torah teaching. That's great. She knew this Torah teaching. In other words, where you took it, Reb Deb, that women should not put on men's clothing and then go out to war, right? So it's basically a kal v'chomer. If you shouldn't do that, in other words, if this is true, then that's true. If you shouldn't do that because it might turn out that way, then a woman should also not use the same weapons of war that a man would use, such as arrows or swords, which is why she takes the tent pin to kill Sisera. Isn't that awesome?
Field? That's fantastic. Thank you. You answered the question, the reflection question. So I want to give people that. I know that we unpacked a lot tonight. So I'm going to just ask you, don't worry about all the allness. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Just remember what you remember. It doesn't matter. You're not going to remember everything. And if there's someone in your world who you might be able to invite into a greater openness, a greater awakening and appreciation of difference around gender or sexual orientation, like, what would you say to that person and how would you present this? Because you know what? We learn what we teach. And so I'm going to give you a little shtickle of a moment to think about, what would you teach about what you just learned to someone who could receive it?